And let's follow up on a story that we brought up here recently involving a teenager who actually came at you while you were reporting in Seattle. It's actually a really sad story, but this teenager was arrested in large part because of what happened between the both of you. So explain the latest development.
Yeah, just a heartbreaking story, but hopefully a happy ending here. Over the weekend, 15-year-old Marcellus Orr, young high school runaway, uh, was arrested. He's addicted to fentanyl. He came at me with an axe. The video went viral. His grandma saw her grandson in my video and reached out to me and said, "If you see him, let me know." And, last weekend, he was spotted at this notorious homeless camp in City Hall. She called police. Police showed up. He's arrested. But what got us to this point, and where my reporting really has come in, is showing the broken system. The grandma, who's a foster grandma, I might add, but she has full custody of this young man, begged the judge, a King County judge, to hold him in the juvenile detention center so he can get treatment for drugs and mental health. Problem is, according to once again, state sentencing guidelines, you can only keep a kid in for so long. So he was released back into the care of his grandmother. Problem is, he ran away the next day and was running the streets until he got arrested again. So we're back at this point now where the judge has decided to hold him this time around, and they're going to get him the treatment. But there's so many other Marcellus Orrs out there. And again, this goes back to something in the water here in Washington State, in King County, and Seattle especially, these liberal, far-left enclaves where you have the activist class that is trying to get rid of the juvenile justice system. And again, Seattle being majority white, they're taking these woke ideas, and in the words of Seattle Police Department African-American Advisory Council Chair Victoria Beach's words, she basically says it's white guilt that has hijacked the Black Lives Matter movement, and they're just pushing these policies and agendas that are undermining and literally killing the Black community. And in this case, the question is, in King County, they're trying to get rid of the juvenile detention center, saying it's unjust that there's an overwhelming amount of Black kids in these detention centers for far too long, and I get that. There should be juvenile justice reform. But what they're not factoring in are these cases like Marcellus Orr. What happens when you have no parents, when you have a foster grandma who also needs to take care of her own kids, now unable to deal with a young child who's running the streets, addicted to fentanyl, and has no place to go? That's the inconvenient truth here, and that's what's going on, and that's why this story, I think, really resonated and hit a chord in the community.
I mean, it's heartbreaking. You see how emotional he was. I mean, he's 15 years old. Let me tackle something you've been getting criticized for in your follow-up report. He is 15 years old. He's a child by definition. He's out on his own. I don't believe his mom or dad are in the picture.
Yep.
Tell me, journalistically, from an ethics standpoint, I mean, you and I in a conventional situation would not put a minor's likeness on the air in any capacity. Usually the name is withheld. You put his name, his likeness, his age all out there front and center. Why are you doing that?
It's because his grandmother, Selena Daniels, asked me to. And I asked very specifically, what do you want me to do with this video? She said, put my grandson's face and name out there, not for his sake, but for the sake of other teens right now who are on the streets or who are about to try fentanyl, meth, other hard drugs that have essentially been decriminalized in Washington State. Insane lawmakers like Manka Dhingra right now, who's in the legislature right now trying to decriminalize drugs. That's my opinion. That's also the opinion of other parents who have kids right now who have literally run away from home and are on the streets trying to find their next high, overdosing, dying on the streets at a record pace. Talk to those parents right now. That's the impact that Miss Daniels wants with this video being out there. And that's why she told me and asked me, Jonathan, please put this stuff out here right now. Put his face out so he can be an example of what you shouldn't do.
After he was arrested, can you give me an update on what's happened to him? And what's the process for his rehabilitation?
Right. So he was arrested. He had his, day in court just yesterday in front of a King County juvenile court judge. Thankfully, the judge agreed this time around to keep him in juvenile detention until this drug treatment bed opens up at another facility. So the hope is he can then get into treatment and spend however many months he needs to get better. Because right now, while Selena Daniels, his grandma, loves him, she can't take him home because the same thing's going to happen. And this goes back to these harm reduction, housing first morons out there who keep saying, oh, we just got to get them into housing. Then we'll get them drug treatment if they want. Selena Daniels says, my grandson should not have a choice in this matter. He needs intervention and forced treatment. And that, along with this arrest, is what could potentially save this young man's life.
And what's been the reaction locally from residents as well as public officials and other folks who are looking at this tragedy? And has anyone come to you or responded in kind to this young man's plight?
I've reached out to all city officials, elected officials, council member Dan Strauss, who represents this downtown core that's had this problematic homeless encampment, the mayor of Seattle, Bruce Harrell. No response. Because what's happened is I've highlighted another inconvenient truth. This has been going on in the city for quite some time. This is the underbelly. This is not what politicians want to talk about. You know why? Because there's no solution. There's no policy to fix this. This is not a priority. And that's what I'm hoping to do, to highlight these stories, especially in communities of color, especially in the Black community. These narratives are not being told by mainstream media, local media. Nobody's covering this. Miss Daniels has been begging for someone to take up her grandson's story. And I did. And the backstory here is I can't believe that my coverage of this viral video of Marcellus Orr chasing me with an axe eventually led to his arrest and possibly will save his life down the line.
And just to be clear, his grandmother asked you to file charges. Is that right?
Yeah. And this is where it goes back to kind of the journalism and the objectivity. And I really thought long and hard about it, but I decided to file a police report. And here's why. The last thing I want to do is clog up the juvenile justice system with more Black kids. But Selena Daniels asked me to file a police report because without the police report, there's a chance that he might be let out again. So she's hoping that this police report, which will lead to a potential felony charge, will lead to this young man getting the treatment he needs behind bars until he gets better.
And so he's currently behind bars, or he's been already processed through the system?
He's behind bars. He's still in juvenile detention. He's waiting for that treatment bed. So we're hoping that this detox time, this time to, help him think away from the fentanyl addicts out there. And, one last thing I want to note about this is, and I didn't include this in the story because I just didn't have the time, but there were teenagers there who were trying to keep him on the streets, other fentanyl addicts, other runaway teenagers in the tents he was staying with, who are trying to keep him there, trying to prevent the police from arresting him. This is like the devil's game, man. There's just some spiritual warfare going on, whatever you believe out there, but there is this pull, these young men and women being targeted on the streets, and in this case, good one.
And as I recall, he chased after you. You didn't file charges immediately, and you actually had a conversation with him, right?
I told him, hey, young man, your family loves you. They want to take you back home. Will you go? And he basically told me to F off. So, and I didn't think I'd see him again. But, this is, at least as far as I'm concerned, a positive outcome.
And by the way, how did the sting operation, how did this go down? I mean, you were obviously there. I would imagine the only camera there to witness this happen. Was this kind of coordinated?
Well, I don't know if you can call it coordinated, but I happened to see this young man, and I let his grandmother know what was going on, and she immediately called police. It was that simple. And thankfully, even with a police force that's been, that's just been diminished, they responded quite quickly within 15 to 20 minutes. That's good response time. And I want to be very clear. The police, even though it was a massive response, they handled this kid with so much gentleness and care. In fact, it was 2 responding officers. They offered him to quietly take him into the cruiser without handcuffs, okay, to not cause a scene. But he refused and wouldn't go peacefully, and that's why they had to call backup. It took 12 officers at the end of the day to get this young man on a stretcher in an ambulance to the hospital and into juvenile detention. I mean, think about the resources and time to go out of your way, because if it was only 1 officer's 2, it could have led to something lethal. This was the right response, right call, and they did it. They did it the right way.
Well, we hope he finds the help that he needs. I mean, it's just a terribly tragic story. I'm glad you did follow up on it. I know you've been getting praise and some criticism for this story, and I
Don't
want
care
to
about
kind
the
of
critics. We told Miss Daniel's story, this young man's story. It's out there, and we hope it makes a difference.